The President's silence on the public service is extremely disappointing. Well, that's the reaction of the Public Servants Association to President Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address. The PSA is also raising the alarm that legislative amendments to address whistleblowers and protection of them are not enough. Let's discuss this now further with PSA's Mr. Maleka. Good evening and thank you very much for joining us here on Newsnight. So eventually we heard from President Cyril Ramaphosa last night after numerous points of order, but it is mentioned that the PSA feels that the President missed out on a few key topics and issues that were left unattended. Just discuss in the PSA's view, what are those issues that the President seemed to have missed?
Yes, thank you, and good evening. Thank you for having me. Yes, extremely disappointed once again. I think a couple of critical issues that the PSA has highlighted. Firstly, the chronic shortage of staff, especially in our institutions like the health institutions, the police institutions. We've been promised year in, year out that these chronic staff shortage will be addressed. But I think last night, once again, the President did make mention of the youth unemployment, but in the general public service at large, I think nothing has come forward, or we didn't hear anything tangible to give institutions like this hope that the staff shortage will be addressed. If you look at health institutions, since 2017, there have been a chronic shortage of staff, especially among doctors and nurses who deliver an essential service to public. You will recall during COVID, they were extremely burnt out. A dire shortage of staff led to a number of problems where a number of officials had to take sick leave simply because they could not cope with the workload. If you look at the police services, I think they've identified the problem itself. The Minister itself of Police indicated that the number of policemen that we have that serves the general public is critically short. There was mention made of the 10111 unit, and this is not something new. This is a problem that has been since 2018, where the President and the Minister of Police indicated that they wish to address this, but nothing has come forward. 10111 is the forefront, or it's a gateway for the most vulnerable of society, where they can call. It's a toll-free number where they can seek assistance when they are either involved in an accident, a robbery, or some sort of emergency, or where they require an ambulance. But 40% of the calls at this unit go unanswered. They've identified the problem, but nothing has been done. Also, the failing infrastructure, especially at health institutions once again. At our schools, you will notice a number of schools have not been repaired after they've been vandalized. If you look at KZN, a number of institutions, schools, have been severely hit by floods. To date, they have not been repaired. And a lot of these kids have to migrate to other schools, long distances. Some of them don't have the necessary transport in order to get to the schools. The other issues, I didn't see the President, or the PSA hasn't seen that the President address some of our employees that have been recently employed, like the community health workers. They're still earning a meager salary, minimum salary, and they deliver critical service to the community. Police reservists, as well as the teacher assistants at schools, I don't see any improvement as far as their salaries are concerned, and they deliver a very critical service to the public as well. The
Mr.
point that you mentioned...
Yes, sorry about that. You can continue.
Yeah, the point that you mentioned about the whistleblowers, I think we tend to forget. The most critical information that comes out is co-employees, co-workers that knows where the corruption and the maladministration takes place. And they are the ones in the most opportune position to actually root out corruption. But many of them fear of the reprisals and the abuse and the victimization, and also death threats if they had to divulge information where colleagues are involved in a lot of maladministration and corruption. I think government needs to take a stand, needs to address the situation very, very quickly and carefully as well, that they need to make legislative amendments that will protect these whistleblowers so that we can root out corruption and maladministration.
Mr. Naika, you briefly touched on the issue of unemployment in the country. We know that this is an ongoing issue for us here in South Africa, and that thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of young people are unemployed currently. There has been the expansion of the employment tax incentives. Do you think that this will see us finding more and more youth finding jobs and finding work placement here in South Africa, or is it just another empty promise?
Well, look, we've been asked throughout the day, or ever since SONA, that, are you positive? Do you think that something will come out of this? We have to remain positive, and we hope that it's just not empty promises by the president. You will recall in the past that the president made a lot of promises as far as youth employment is concerned, as far as the National Youth Development Agency, funding of the National Youth Development Agency to try and curb the unemployment rate, to try and get it down so that the youth that have graduated will find employment. We're hoping that this year there'll be a complete turnaround. Yes, the incentive, the proposals are great, but there's been a lot of proposals in the past, but it has not been implemented. And I think the critical issue is that if we don't get rid of corruption and maladministration, we're never ever going to get the finance to finance all these wonderful proposals that the president has actually outlined yesterday.
And Mr. Naika, the president also spoke and implemented the national state of disaster when it comes to the electricity crisis in South Africa. Are you hopeful that this will see a change for the issues with regards to load shedding that we are witnessing in the country?
A lot have been said yesterday. A lot of politicians have actually remarked that, listen, was there a need for a minister of electricity? I'm not too sure. I think that we could have managed these things without declaring a state of disaster. The PSA feels that a lot could be done apart from declaring a state of disaster, that we could take care of the energy crisis. And once again, I must emphasize, it sounds like a cliched statement. Had it not been for the maladministration and corruption at these SOEs and various other institutions, we probably would have the finances to try and eradicate this problem. You remember during COVID, wonderful ideas that we had. South Africa was at the forefront of trying to curb the COVID pandemic, and all to be blighted simply by individuals that have been found wanting, looting state coffers for their own personal gain, and yet the most vulnerable in our society suffers simply because there's no money to deliver on the promises that the president and other ministers have actually outlined. So I'm hoping, and we want to be positive, as an organization like the PSA, if we don't remain positive, then what hope is there for those vulnerable employees that we serve on a daily basis and the public servants? We have to give them hope, and we appeal to the president that all these wonderful proposals that they make, let's try and implement that. Even if you take it step by step, I'm sure we will get there.
And with regards to the corruption and looting that took place during the COVID-19 pandemic and that national state of disaster that was implemented, is there some relief that the Auditor General has been brought in now before this has been concluded? Do you find some sort of relief that you know that the Auditor General will be involved in making sure that hopefully this time around looting and corruption will not happen?
Well, it's another step in the right direction. I think the Auditor General over the past year and the previous years have outlined a number of municipalities that had qualified audit reports, maladministration where spending wasn't done in the proper manner and it wasn't according to book. So hopefully that this initiative that the Auditor General be brought in as an oversight role and obviously to look at procurement, we hope that it will solve the problem. And if what goes by in the past, where the Auditor General has outlined a number of departments as far as maladministration and corruption is concerned, I think that maybe it's a good step, and we hope that it will ensure that there's no corruption and maladministration, and the money that is actually set aside is used for the proper purposes and for the intended purposes. So we remain confident in that regard.
Mr. Naika, I was reading through the press release that the PSA sent out, and there was concern around public servants' pension and money used as a funding solution for government. Just talk us through those concerns. Where are those concerns coming from?
Well, there was mention made that once again we have institutions like the PIC, which administers obviously the pension fund on behalf of the GEPF. We don't want to see these institutions being utilized as cash cows. You'll remember in the past, monies have been utilized in areas where there was no returns on these growth. These are hard-earned monies of public servants. Most of them are at the retirement age. Nobody wants to see their hard-earned savings go down the drain as far as poor investments are concerned. We have in the past told government that public service pension fund money is not to be utilized nilly-willy just to try and address those areas where you've had maladministration and corruption. You need to root out the corruption first. And the investments, yes, we understand that PIC has a mandate as far as the GPF is concerned in order to invest this monies. But due diligence has to be done before these investments are considered. We cannot continuously be subsidizing state-owned entities if these entities are not showing a profit, are not delivering on the mandate, are not delivering to the poor, to the most vulnerable in our society. If you look at the load shedding now, it's a crisis. It's gone beyond a crisis situation. All because we failed to utilize the money for the intended purposes, and now we're sitting with a major problem. And once again, we are basically looking towards PIC and monies from the GEPF to actually try and rescue the state-owned entity. The PSA will definitely not want that to happen, and we will fight vigorously to ensure that all public servants who saved throughout the years get what they deserve when they do retire.
Mr. Naika, thank you very much for your insights and for joining us this evening on Newsnight. We appreciate your time. That was Claude Naika from the Public Service Association, just chatting to us about their reaction to the State of the Nation address that we saw taking place last night.